Heading south of the Mason-Dixon, this is the Week in Review at the Abbeville Institute. Here is your host, Brian McClanahan.
Welcome back to the Week in Review at the Abbeville Institute. This is your host, Brian McClanahan, and this is episode 261, covering the week of May 10th through May 14th, 2021. Glad to have you back in the program. Very glad to be here. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter, like our Facebook page, and subscribe to our YouTube page. You can find all those social media accounts at our webpage, abbevilleinstitute.org. That's ABBEVILLE, institute.org. While you're there, give us an email address. We'll give you a free ebook, Exploring the Southern Tradition. It's a great book by 20 Abbeville Institute scholars, and yours free of charge, simply for giving us an email address. Of course, you can purchase that book at Amazon if you would like. All you got to do is look it up if you want a hard copy of it. Some people like that, but you get it free of charge just for giving us an email address. If you give us that email address, that's our way we can contact you with any events or any upcoming information. You also get our daily dose of Dixie Monday through Friday or Tuesday through Saturday, depending on how we set it up that week. So you get us 5 days a week in your inbox. I know that sounds like a lot, but these are the articles that we put out every single day, Monday through Friday, and it's a great way for you to see what's going on with the Abbeville Institute. You can also support the Institute by clicking on that support tab at the top of the page. You can donate monthly, annually, or a one-time gift. So if you like what we do, you like our podcasts, you like our conferences, you like our webinars, you like our videos, you like our press, all these things, well, consider a donation to the Institute. It is tax deductible to the full extent of the law. You can also click on that Shop tab at abbevilleinstitute.org. You can buy your Abbeville Institute apparel, get that high-quality embroidered logo on a t-shirt, golf towel, hat, all kinds of great things, so you can advertise the Institute while you're out walking around town. I want to say something about our webinars. We do have one coming up. A couple of things going on. We have a webinar coming up. It'll be at the end of May, May 26th. This one is not sold quite as quickly as the others, so there still are tickets available if you're on our email list, I should say. If you're on the email list, you should have gotten an email about it. It's on the Anti-Federalist. It's going to be a great webinar. I know it's not one on the war, so these fill up a little more slowly, but we still have a few tickets left for that. So if you're getting this podcast, and it's the week of May 10th through 14th, head on over to your email inbox and look for that email about our webinar. Or you can go to our Facebook page where we have a link to it as well, and you can click on that and go out and purchase a ticket. These webinars are only $10. And after you attend the webinar, or if you miss the webinar and you've paid for it, you get a free replay of it. So it's a great win-win for you. And if you missed any of our webinars, go to abbevilleacademy.org. You can pick up any of those webinars for $15 once you're there. That helps cover the administrative costs for having the website to host those things. Also, we have our summer school coming up in July. Another great event. It is sold out, but we're thinking about trying to do some things with that in the future to make it a little better, so we have more seats. But right now, that is sold out. We've got a lot of cool things coming up. There's so much good stuff going on behind the scenes. We're really excited about what the second half of 2021 is going to hold, and of course, 2022. And so stay on board with us. You know, we are an organization that does exist by your generous contributions alone. We are an organization that needs your help and your support. So share our material around on social media. Rate this podcast where you get podcasts. Do all you can to get people interested in the Institute. It's how we continue to grow, and our growth is sustained. I mean, we are growing every month. We are growing organically, so that's good. More and more people find us all the time, and it all is because of you, because you go out there and you tell your friends, hey, look at this article at the Abbeville Institute, or hear this podcast, or look at this lecture we've got on YouTube. These are all, we do so much free of charge. Lectures, videos. You don't have to contribute anything if you don't want to, but if you want to see these things continue, then of course a donation is always welcomed and appreciated. All right, well, let's talk about the material for the week. It's a little longer spiel on what we do at the Institute here in the beginning of the program, but I wanted to emphasize some of those things. Let's talk about the material for the week. And of course, again, since 2015, it seems like we're in Groundhog Day. It's every single day there is a new attack on the South, and it comes from the left and the right. I mean, it's not like we've got conservative allies and they're defending the South and the Southern tradition, and then we've got these leftist whores trying to tear it down. No. The right is as vindictive in attacking the South as the left. And I mean, a good example of that is the Princeton now professor Alan Gelzo, who's never met a Confederate monument he doesn't want taken down. He actually came out in a Law and Liberty piece the other day with a five-step process for determining whether a monument should stay up. And guess what? It should come down if that person advocated treason. So what does that mean? Well, of course, to Allen Guelzo, every Confederate advocated treason. So all the Confederate monuments have to come down. You see, who needs enemies when you got friends like Allen Guelzo? This is the problem. And Allen Guelzo is considered to be a quote-unquote conservative historian. It's just part and parcel of the problem. You've got Victor Davis Hanson. You've got all these people out there that run around, Michael Anton, that run around trying to cancel the South. They do it on a regular basis. And again, these are people on the right. So where do we go from here in the South? I mean, how do we defend the tradition against conservatives and liberals or progressives, whatever you want to call them? They used to be liberals, now they're progressives. They're just, I mean, who knows what these people are anymore? Social justice warriors, woke warriors. We've got real issues in America culturally. Now, the interesting thing about that, of course, is that there was a piece that I did on my own podcast. If you want to get me 4 days a week, plus this podcast, 4 more days a week, go to brianmcclanahan.com and you can check out my podcast. But I did a podcast on an article that appeared in a Newsweek where a progressive said, you know what doesn't work? Racial class politics. It doesn't work. Nobody votes on that. I mean, so the progressives, the white liberals running around doing these things, the white progressives are the ones that are advocating this stuff the most, whereas it doesn't really resonate with minority voters as much as people think, maybe 50% or so. But 50% don't care. They just want jobs. They want school. They want a safe community to live in. I mean, this is what most Americans want. Most Americans are in that category. It doesn't matter your race, your background, where you are. They want jobs, schools. They want a safe community. They want, a stable currency. They want to make sure that, when they go to the store, the prices aren't going up exponentially and all these kind of things. This is what people want. And the Southern tradition offers a way for people to talk about these things with something that there's concrete, right? I mean, so Southerners have been talking about these issues for a long time. What happens if you don't have a sound currency? Well, we know people like John Taylor of Caroline, and John C. Calhoun, and Thomas Jefferson, and they talked about sound currency. Southerners were interested in a stable currency and no central banking system for a long period of time. I mean, so what we have is a Federal Reserve, and they're creating a currency that's not very stable, right? We're seeing inflation right now. This is something the Southern critique of America offers. Well, what can we do? Here's an example. Let's be good Jeffersonians. We know that there are problems with labor. I mean, look, this is an issue. Southerners were interested in a modified labor system in the New South. They were using a paternalistic system then. And we can say that term paternalism it's loaded, right? But when you think about it, good benefits, retirement, workman's comp, all of these. And it didn't mean Southerners were doing all this stuff, but all this stuff really originated in the South, this idea of stable labor relations and how workers should be treated. You see that in the New South in ways that the left doesn't really want to recognize. Political decentralization, states' rights or real federalism, opposition to unconstitutional or stupid Supreme Court decisions, a limited executive. These are things that Southerners advocated for a long time. The Southern tradition still matters because these things still matter in modern American society. So when we talk about the South, it's important to be positive. It's not just about, this war, this 4-year period. That's not it. The left focuses on that because they think if they can tear down, it's a distraction from what's really going on in America. And, of course, if the South, and progressives, left and right, focus on that. Because if we just exercise those demons, everything's going to be okay. Because everything in America, the whole problem with America, this is where they're all on the same page, is the South. The South was on the other side of history, wrong side of history, and race relations and labor and all these things. But is that really the whole story? And we know it's not. If you listen to the Southern tradition and you read Southerners, you really read John C. Calhoun, you really read John Randolph of Roanoke or John Taylor of Caroline or Abel Upshur, or going into the 20th century, you look at the agrarians. You really read these things. you'll find that Southerners were on the cutting edge of doing things that were best for large swaths of the population. And of course, now because of, but they left out minorities. Okay, well, granted, but does that apply today? Can't we still apply these things to everyone today? Don't they still work? Of course they work. This is the stupid thing about it. If all you do is focus on race and slavery, which the progressive right likes to do as well, then you're going to eliminate an important part of the American story. And our pieces this week really do get into that, I think. You've got the piece by Earl Starbuck, this is his fourth part of his four-part series on Robert E. Lee. It's been tremendous. I have to give Mr. Starbuck credit for this. We get a lot of good material at the Institute, but he took a lot of time on this four-part series. Mr. Starbuck is not a professional academic. He's not someone who goes to an office at a college university every day and sits down and has time to write out these type of essays. He has a job, and this is a hobby for him. And it's better. It's better than what I would see, and I would not be stretching the truth here. It's better than what you would see from a lot of college undergraduates when they write research papers. And in a history college undergrad, history majors that are college undergraduates who write research papers, who can't barely even compose a paragraph. So he has done a great service to Robert E. Lee and to Lee's legacy by writing this essay, these four essays. We know that Washington and Lee University in June is going to decide whether they're going to drop Lee's name from the institution. Who knows if they're going to do it or not? We spent a lot of time trying to combat that here at the Institute, and there are others who are trying to do it as well. If you know somebody that's an alumni from Washington and Lee, if you know have any contacts there, anything, turn them on to our stuff. This four-part series by Jake Starbuck, which was designed, Mr. Starbuck is a devout Christian, so it's designed to persuade Christians who want to purge Robert E. Lee that they shouldn't be doing it. And of course, he has, Lee the believer, his Christian faith, the father, the soldier, and the educator. All these things matter for Lee the man. And I think that's the beautiful part of these essays. If you don't really understand Robert E. Lee and you want to get it in a very short, concise way, then read this four-part series on Robert E. Lee. It's fantastic. So Lee the educator, this is his time at Washington College, which is now Washington and Lee University. And the wonderful things he did there to resurrect that school, which was basically dead at the end of the war. Lee takes the position of president, saves the school, brings it back, and now they want to take his name off of it. Ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. But this is part of cancel culture. This is what we get with cancel culture. You've got Ty Sedgley, Robert E. Lee, and me. Robert E. Lee is a terrible guy. Just read Elizabeth Brown Pryor, whose book on reading the man. It's the best biography ever written. No, it's not. I think Starbuck has shown that conclusively with his four-part essay on Lee, where he covers all the same stuff that Pryor supposedly, had new documents that shed new light on Robert E. Lee. Freeman covered all that stuff. He might not have had these documents, but he covered it all anyways. And he covered it with the material that he had, which covered the material, covered the subjects. But Pryor, she used to run around and confront people who praised Lee. You don't know him. You don't know him. The typical Yankee trying to tell everybody that, Lee is terrible. But this series is fantastic, and I can't recommend it enough. And this last essay on Lee and his time at Washington Lee, which is something that I focused on in that essay I wrote years ago, Robert E. Lee versus Twitter Historians, where I talked about the charges made against Lee about looking the other way with Klan groups at Washington College or attacking black Virginians. All of that stuff didn't happen, or at least if it did happen, Lee didn't condone any of it. In fact, he expelled people for doing it. The minutes from Washington College, the faculty minutes, attest to that, yet we're supposed to believe that Lee looked the other way. This is where these idiots at the Atlantic and other places, and there was another hit piece on the Confederacy at the Atlantic this week, Amazingly enough, these hit pieces that come from the left always fact check us, like the lost causers, the neo-Confederates. Let's fact check the neo-Confederates because we need to understand these people lie all the time. Why Confederate lies continue to exist. But yet when they start writing stuff that they believe, there's no fact checking. No fact checking, no saying, well, this historian said this, or this tour guide at some historic plantation said this, but you know what? Let's go and see if that's true. No, they just want to believe it. It's another myth for them. They want to believe it. And the subtitle of that essay, which is so funny, is something like, why Americans continue to believe, myths or lies. Well, why do these people continue to believe lies when the information doesn't match what they believe or what they think? Why do they do that? No answer for that. But yet all of us on the right, all us neo-Confederates, as they like to say, or lost causers. And when you engage these people on social media, it's the wave of the hand. Oh, well, you just write for Abbeville Institute. Oh, it's just Abbeville Institute. Not actually dealing with what it says. Oh, it's Abbeville Institute. That's a very bad look because they can't really address what it says. They can't. They won't. And so I think that's the problem with this. One of the other things, of course, these people like to do is play semantics. They like to play games with that. Well, that person's not a soldier because the Confederacy didn't recognize them as a soldier. And this is true. Look, the Confederacy didn't recognize anybody but white Southerners serving in the Army as official soldiers. But we know people did stuff in the Army. We know there were, quote-unquote, black Confederates. And again, if someone who drives a wagon or cooks, plays music for the Army, are they soldiers? Under the modern definition, they would be. You have people that are in the U.S. Army band. I don't know if they're really soldiers. They just play in the band. I don't know. Is that their job? Are they soldiers or not? The other thing the question is, well, these people, even if they had to pick up firearms, they were enslaved. They were pressed into this. They had no choice. Well, that raises a question. Is someone who was drafted in no different a situation? If the United States Army said to me today, hey, you got to go serve in the Army. If I don't go do it, what's going to happen to me? Well, I'm going to get thrown in jail. My freedom is over because I've dodged the draft. Is that not a form of enslavement for me? Of course it is. Of course it is. I might have been free beforehand, but I'm now pressed into service, and I can die for that. So in that case, it's even worse. If you're just saying these people were enslaved and they're cooking and they're driving wagons, they're not actually facing fire oftentimes. So that's actually a better situation than what you would be pressed into, facing cannons. But we use these terms, we ignore the fact that conscripted people are also enslaved. So these other people are enslaved. Obviously, they can't say no if they're going to go into service. You're going to come with me. Okay. What are they going to do? They can't say no. But is this not a similar situation for these people? So semantics matters. The context matters. All of it matters. And they simply try to discount anything that might punch holes in their stupid narratives. But they do it regardless. And so we see this not just with Lee, and I like Starbuck's piece for that. But look at the piece by Jack Marcourt on Thursday, Angers Away, and the effort of the United States Navy to rename some naval vessels. And I love this piece for a particular reason. Jack went out and he emailed one of the admirals, emailed him, said, hey, look, what do you think about renaming these vessels? What do you think about that? And the admiral he emailed was Hyman Rickover. He's often called the father of the nuclear navy. And of course, there were 3 submarines in these nuclear submarines, the Robert E. Lee, the Stonewall Jackson, and the John C. Calhoun. And in 1972, Rickover wrote a book, Eminent Americans, Namesakes of the Polaris Submarine Fleet, and he praised Lee, Jackson, and Calhoun. In the preface, Rickover said this: "Unless this takes place, we will increasingly become a fragmented nation, each interest group attempting to use the national patrimony for its own good rather than for the nation as a whole. The lives of the Americans described in these essays may offer insights into how we may once again feel a sense of unity of interest. And by picking people from all over, we got Southerners, we got these, by doing that, you create unity." So Jack emailed Rickover. And he said, "Hey, look, what do you think about this?" And Rickover responded, "In my naval career, I have never heard anyone complain about a ship's name. Typically, people were quite proud of the names of their ships or submarines and knew the history of the individuals after whom they were named. I'm also certain that people currently in the service have no issue with the names of their vessels." He further noted that as only a little over 7% of Americans living today have ever seen military service, the probability is that the people who now take issue with the Confederate names of Army bases and Navy ships have never served in the military. The only exception to the latter, I should add, would be the pitiful cadre of high-ranking military brass who have now seen fit to join forces with the social justice warriors for personal or political gain, i.e. Ty Sedgley. Now, the interesting thing about Rickover, and he brings this up, he says, "As a final point, one should also be aware of Admiral Hyman Rickover's personal history in order to properly judge his perspective regarding those men about whom he wrote. Rickover, who was born into a poor Jewish family and then Russian-dominated Poland, was certainly no stranger to prejudice and persecution. As a Jewish child in Poland, he would have been forbidden from attending any public schools. However, even after his family immigrated to America in 1906, he soon discovered that virulent anti-Semitism was also rampant in his new homeland. While young Rickover was able to go to school in America, he always found that the specter of religious prejudice haunted each of his classrooms, even those at the U.S. Naval Academy. Rickover, however, managed to rise above such persecution and become one of America's most influential and respected military leaders and innovators." So here's a man, a Jewish American, who faced persecution, who faced discrimination, and yet he's fine with having ships named after Robert E. Lee, John C. Calhoun, and Stonewall Jackson. In fact, he thought it was a good thing. So when people were real about, and didn't think things weren't so stupid. But you look at this cancel culture. So we're now going to cancel these ships. Matthew Fontaine Maury is one who's getting canceled. We've written about him on the Abbeville site before. The father of American oceanography. I mean, if anybody needs to be on a ship, it would be Matthew Fontaine Maury. But, no. He supported the Confederacy, so he's got to go. That's how stupid this is. I mean, you really can't make up the stupidity here, but we have to go through this every single week. But you look at cancel culture, and then you've got the piece on Tuesday, which I really liked. It's Carry Me Back to Old Virginia. It's about the man who wrote that particular song, Carry Me Back to Old Virginia, which was the official song of Virginia for a good part of the 20th century. It was then changed. I think in 2015 they picked a new song. This piece says there's no new song, but there's a new state song. But the piece was written by a man named James Bland. James Bland. Now, James Bland is black. So what happened when they canceled Carry Me Back to Old Virginia? They canceled a black Virginian and his song. They canceled it. Now, this is a man who performed all over the United States in his minstrel shows after the war. And this song was very, very popular all over the place. He also wrote a number of other tunes. But Carry Me Back to Old Virginia, was a very popular song for a number of musicians. Some of them black, like Ray Charles. I guess he was racist because he liked the song. I mean, this is just stupid. So you have this effort to rename a song or get rid of a song, retire a song because it's supposed to be racist, but it's written by a black guy in the South. I mean, you almost, again, at this point, how stupid and hypocritical is all of this? But this is a nice example of what the left always does. They try to tear. They don't really know the history of something or who wrote it, but it's just racist. We got to get rid of it. Louis Armstrong, when he performed "When It's Sleepy Time Down South," now some would say that particular song was designed to get white jazz listeners interested in the music, and that Armstrong was trying to pander to white jazz music lovers with a stereotypical image of black experience in the South. And so some black Southerners didn't like that particular song, but he did a music video for that when that particular song came out. And my gosh, you couldn't make this thing today, but he did it. He made this music video, and it was very, very popular. In fact, the song was very popular. And Louis Armstrong loved being from the South. He loved it. That was his home. This is something we don't understand. James Bland, of course, he's named after the Bland family. They're one of the most important colonial families in Virginia. James Bland loved Virginia. That's why he wrote the song. He loved the history of his state. He loved it all. Good and bad, but he saw it just as home, and it just was the way things were. And so why not? I mean, there's actually a book written about the fact that perhaps a black family wrote Dixie. And if that's the case, why will we cancel this stuff? You see, this is interesting when people like Kevin Levin run around trying to say that black Confederates didn't exist. He's a Bostonian, a white Bostonian, trying to deny black Southerners their history. Now, in any other case, this would be cultural appropriation, or you would be trying to deny someone of a different race their history, a history denied. Yet in this case, it's not looked at well because he's saying that, these people, because it's politically correct to do it. I mean, the hypocrisy cannot be thicker in this particular case. Or in this case whatsoever, carrying back to old Virginia, whatever it is. And then you have the piece on Monday, which is an updated piece from something we ran several years ago by Timothy Duskin. Did slavery end on June 19th? You get this idea, Juneteenth, right? So we're going to have a holiday of June 19th when slavery ended. But even the image that we put at the front of the piece, it's so good. It's a military circular, and I'm going to read this. This is from 1863, April of 1863. Now, remember, this is after the Emancipation Proclamation has been issued. In fact, several months after the Emancipation Proclamation has been issued. New Iberia, Louisiana. The generally received impression that the slaves of this parish are free by force of the presence of the Union Army is erroneous. This parish, St. Martin, is accepted by name in the Emancipation Proclamation of President Lincoln issued in Washington, D.C., January 1, 1863. No further interference with the institution of slavery will be allowed by the Army authorities than may necessarily result from the police regulations. United States Army officers are forbidden by law of Congress to use force in the restoration of slaves to masters. If slaves free from their masters, they must work on government works, receiving thereafter full rations for full days' work. So if you flee, you're going to be made a slave on government works. You're going to be building fortifications and other things. This is what you have to do. You're not free and equal. You're going to be forced into service by the United States Army. If slaves voluntarily return to their masters, they will not be molested. If masters use force in abducting runaway slaves, the masters will be arrested. If masters inhumanely punish or whip their slaves, they must be arrested. No punishment of slaves will be permitted except such as practiced in the army. So whatever that would be, which, by the way, I mean, you see this thing on whipping, that occurred in the Navy even into the late 19th century. Whipping for crimes was common. But this is A.B. Long, the captain and provost marshal commanding post at New Iberia Parish in Louisiana. And I think it's important to note, he's saying, look, slavery didn't end on June 19th. It didn't end until the 13th Amendment was ratified in December of 1865. In fact, even after the war was over, you saw places in the states that were still loyal to the Union advancing slave auctions and other things after the war was over. But yet, the war was about ending slavery, supposedly. The people on the progressive side can't really reconcile. They can't get around this. They don't really know how to do it. Oh, well, I mean, but Lincoln at least took the emancipation, at least issued that. But it exempted areas that were in the Confederacy, and so there were very few places in the North that were actually, it exempted places that were in Union-controlled hands. Excuse me, not only freed slaves in the Confederacy, exempted places under Union-controlled hands. So that means slavery existed in the North. It existed in these army areas, where the army occupied areas still existed. It didn't end. So this is where all of this stuff is just so stupid. The information, the information we have completely blows apart the righteous cause myth. But why do people still believe these lies? I don't know, but they do. And then the last piece of the week, the statue should stay up, by Prelio Alexander. I love the last line of this because, he gets into the fact that people attacking these statues don't really understand what they're doing long term, what it's going to mean. And he says in the end, I fear America is striking the tent on the kind of honor that used to mold a man. North, south, black and white. We are a nation obsessed with toxic masculinity, a laughable debate about gender, the importance of feelings over facts, and demanding our young boys mirror the behavior of young girls. 50 years from now, perhaps these statues can become history lessons, as fathers can point them out to their sons and simply say, he was a man. It may be a concept lost to future generations. I mean, this is true, right? So as we're taking down these heroes, as Booker T. Washington said, we need the best examples of manhood in the South. As we're taking these things down, what are we left with? What are we putting up in their place? Nothing. Nothing. It's embarrassing what we're doing. It's embarrassing. This is the left's steamroll of traditional America. And it's awful. But it's where we are in modern society. He said at one part, on the other hand, it was common for Confederate soldiers to weep when they had the chance to simply lay eyes on General Lee as he rode by. Is it because they were thinking, there goes the greatest bigot of all time? Of course not. He says, or is it because they thought, there goes an officer and a gentleman, a man who thinks of us before he thinks of himself, a man who wants to ride toward the front of the column within range of the enemy, despite the danger to himself. That was Lee. That was why Lee was so respected. It's why men like Winfield Scott, who Lincoln sacked, wouldn't listen to. Winfield Scott was one of the greatest generals in American history. A man who loved his men as well. A man who really loved Robert E. Lee. Wanted Lee to lead his army. And of course, Lee turned him down. But Scott had that kind of attachment from his men. Lee did as well. And that's why Lee should be honored. And in many cases, you look at the men, the common soldier in the North who went out, charged the lines for his cause, or the South, the common soldier who charged the line for his cause. We recognize these sides should both be honored. These were brave men doing what they thought was right. Now you can only honor one side and not the other. And that is to the detriment of America, as our great Navy Admiral pointed out. Until next time, good day.